What if I told you that a single night's sleep redefined everything we know about the human mind? The year is 1909. A transatlantic liner cuts through the Atlantic Ocean, heading toward New York as steam blends with the cold mist. Inside a cramped cabin, two legends share the air, and the fate of psychology. Sigmund Freud, the master, and Carl Gustav Jung, the intellectual heir. The sea sways, the wood creaks, suitcases slide a few inches with each crack of the hull. Tension lingers like a third passenger. Freud reviews his notes. Jung stares at the dark window, restless. As night deepens, the ship groans under a gentle storm. Exhausted, Jung succumbs to sleep and plunges into an infinite underground. He descends spiral staircases, floor after floor, until he reaches a chamber flooded with ancient blood. At its center stands a white tree, pulsing like a living heart. Symbols vibrate on its trunk. Snakes, solar discs, eyes that follow him. A thunder of water and stone shatters the silence. The floor splits open and swallows him whole. He wakes gasping, cold sweat on his neck, sheets tangled in his fingers. He lights the oil lamp. Freud snores oblivious. Jung grabs his black-covered notebook and scribbles with a trembling hand. I dreamed of a many-leveled underground. The ink is still wet when the ship lurches again. Outside, the Atlantic echoes his dream in dark waves. He closes the diary, but his heart still races. The wood creaks as if keeping pace with his pulse. Under the swirling sky, Jung senses that this symbolism isn't his alone. It belongs to the very fabric of humanity's slumbering mind. The voyage ends. The ship docks in New York under a gray sky, crowds waiting at the piers. Freud and Jung are welcomed as pioneers of psychoanalysis. But something between them has already shifted. Jung, once the protege, the symbolic son, begins to drift from his theoretical father. Freud is rigid, methodical, certain that the unconscious is driven by repressed sexual urges. To him, everything circles back to desire. But the dream defies that logic. Days later, in a quiet moment between engagements, Jung decides to share what he saw. He describes the subterranean floors, the blood, the symbols. He expects interest, perhaps admiration, but Freud only laughs. Dreams like that are remnants of childhood fantasy. You're projecting mythology where there's only desire. Jung swallows hard. A silence grows between them. There's no argument, just the weight of an invisible chasm forming. For the first time, Jung feels there are things Freud doesn't want to understand, and perhaps never will. On the return voyage to Europe, Jung carries more than luggage. He carries the weight of rupture. The master he devoted years to won't follow him into the depths of the unconscious. The ship that once united them now divides. Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, remains on his theoretical continent. Jung prepares to explore an uncharted territory. Back in Switzerland, Jung can no longer ignore the dream's call. Something in it pulses, demands deciphering. He withdraws from academia. Bit by bit, he still sees patients, but increasingly, his focus turns inward to his own dreams. He begins recording them meticulously, like an archaeologist excavating the ruins of his own psyche. In the silence of his study by candlelight, he embarks on what he'd later call the confrontation with the unconscious. The red book emerges, thick hand-bound. Its pages soon fill with images, spirals, winged creatures, eyes inside labyrinths, nameless gods. I sank into the abyss. But there was gold in the darkness, he writes, as if addressing a consciousness deeper than his own. The obsession grows. Jung draws, paints, documents symbols in near-delirious detail. In dreams, a woman with raven wings guides him to a tower. An old man with a white beard hands him a key made of bone. A ring of fire spins beneath a sky of stone. None of it makes sense, and yet none of it is random. His colleagues begin to whisper. They say he has gone mad, that he lost his way after breaking with Freud. Some avoid him, others mock him, but Jung presses on. He feels he is on the threshold of something immense. It is not delusion, it is language. The unconscious speaks in symbols. This conviction consumes and strengthens him. With each dream, he dives deeper. With each figure, he finds clues. Jung doesn't just want to understand himself. He wants to decipher what connects all humans in a single invisible psychic flow. With hundreds of dreams recorded, Jung begins to notice something unsettling. The symbols repeat. Even when the content varies, the images return with different faces. Serpents, mandalas, crosses, solar gods, spirals, cosmic trees. And not just in his dreams. Patients report similar images. Some are farmers, others intellectuals, others can barely read. Yet they dream of the same symbols, of universal structures that cannot be explained solely by their personal histories. Intrigued, Jung expands his research into ancient myths and religions. He studies alchemy, Hindu texts, Christian mysticism, Egyptian art, indigenous legends. And in all these systems, the same patterns emerge. The wounded hero, the great mother, the shadow, renewal, rebirth, the serpent devouring its own tail. These images are not mine, nor do they belong to my patients. They belong to humanity. Then he names what no one had dared to define before: the collective unconscious, a deep layer of the human psyche, shared by all, alive, symbolic, transgenerational, not made of individual memories, but of inherited structures, archetypes. This conclusion changes everything. The unconscious is no longer just a repressed personal basement, but reveals itself as a shared symbolic ocean, an invisible inheritance, a universal language code. But this discovery also comes at a cost. Jung knows that by revealing this, he will break definitively with Freud and with much of the scientific community. He takes a deep breath. His next decision could establish him as a visionary or destroy him as a fraud. The year is 1916. Jung is invited to a psychology conference in Zurich. Before doctors, psychoanalysts, and scholars of the mind, he will have the chance to present his theory to the world. But not everyone encourages him. Close friends advise him not to expose his ideas so soon. You will be ridiculed. Science is not ready for this. Return to Freud. There's still time. But Jung has already crossed that point. The night before the lecture, he walks alone along the shores of Lake Zurich. The sky is clear. The stars seem like ancient eyes. In his pocket, he carries trembling notes. Not just ideas, but an inner journey few would understand. He gazes at the water and murmurs. There is something within us deeper than repressed desire. An ancestral river that flows through us. The next morning, the hall is packed. Electric lights flicker, chairs creak, the air is tense. Jung steps onto the stage. For a moment, his eyes wander over the faces in the audience. Skeptical doctors, attentive scholars, and others merely curious. He breathes. He begins by speaking of dreams, of symbols that repeat, of myths that arise even where they were never taught. He speaks of the great mother, the hero, the wise old man, the divine child. He speaks of what is universal, invisible, and undeniable. These images are not created. They are discovered. They were already within us. The room falls silent. He doesn't know it yet, but this is the beginning of his greatest battle. The silence in the room is almost tangible. Jung moves through concepts and metaphors like someone unveiling a new layer of reality. He speaks of the collective unconscious, a mind beneath the mind, where symbols, stories, and images live, belonging not to the individual but to the species. In conference halls or therapy offices, a question lingers. How can dreams from such different cultures carry such similar symbols? A Swiss man who never opened a book about Egypt dreams of pyramids. A child in Japan describes the same serpent that appears in African myths. What does this reveal? That there are layers in the mind beyond personal experience. Patterns that shape not only what we remember, but how we dream, love, and even fear. In the audience, reactions split. Some cross their arms, skeptical. Others whisper, as if recognizing something they've felt before. A few laugh quietly, alone. When the speech ends, silence lingers. Until the crowd fractures. Some applaud moved. Others walk out indifferent. A few remain still, confused. It might take years for them to digest what they've heard. The speaker steps down uncertain, unsure if they were clear or misunderstood. But one thing is certain. Something there has changed forever. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a colleague hears about the event. No reply, no letter. The rift is now complete. From that point on, it's no longer just another theory. It's the start of a new path to understanding the mind, not just as something individual, but as part of something greater. Years pass, technological revolutions, medical breakthroughs, societies transformed, and yet the same questions resurface. Are these universal symbols real, or just stories we tell ourselves? Slowly, science begins to answer. In labs, machines capture images of brains reacting to ancient symbols, circles, maternal figures, all-seeing eyes. And here's the surprise. The same neural areas light up, no matter where the person is from, as if there were a hidden language, written directly into the nervous system. At the same time, therapeutic practices and even the business world adopt these ideas. What was once seen as poetic gains the status of a useful tool. We dream in different dialects, but with the same images, the theorist would say, if alive.